The moon was too bright for a night meant to destroy her. It hung over the full moon alliance ceremony like a silver blade, cold and perfect, pouring light across the marble courtyard of the Silver Moon estate. Every banner snapped in the wind. Every crystal lantern burned with blue-white fire. Every noble family in Ethelgard had gathered beneath the open sky to witness the sacred exchange of vows, alliances, bloodlines, and power. And Elara Vance stood at the edge of it all in a dress that had been mended so many times, the seams had become scars. The hem brushed her ankles in uneven threads. Rain from an earlier drizzle still clung to the faded fabric, making it heavy against her skin. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, fingers numb, nails biting crescent moons into her palms. Around her, daughters of noble wolves glittered in silk and moonstone, their hair pinned with silver combs, their throats decorated with gems that caught the lantern light. Elara had nothing but an old ribbon at her wrist and a heart that would not stop pounding. Across the courtyard, beneath the ceremonial arch of white branches and silver roses, stood Adrian Vale, the heir of Silver Moon. The boy who had once sneaked bread to her when the pack kitchens forgot to feed the Omega quarters. The boy who had taught her to climb the eastern cliffs and whispered, "One day, I'll take you somewhere no one can hurt you." The boy who had kissed her under the first autumn moon and trembled like she was something precious. Now he stood in a tailored black ceremonial coat, broad-shouldered and polished, his pale blonde hair swept back from a face carved for admiration. His gray eyes passed over the crowd with practiced calm. Then they found her. For one breath, the noise of the ceremony vanished. Elara felt the mate bonds stir beneath her ribs. It was not a gentle thing. It was heat and ache and recognition, a golden thread pulled tight through her soul. Her wolf lifted inside her, weak from years of suppression, but awake. Hope rose so violently that it hurt. Her throat tightened. Her lips parted. Adrian knew. She saw it in the flicker of his eyes. The way his jaw tensed. The way his hand curled once at his side before he smoothed his expression into something cold enough to freeze blood. "Elara Vance," he said. Her name carried across the courtyard. Every conversation died. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. The Alpha, the elders, the allied pack leaders, the noble families, the servants watching from the shadows. All of them looked. All of them saw the outcast girl in the threadbare dress standing beneath the full moon as the heir of Silver Moon called her forward. Elara's feet moved before her mind could command them. Each step across the marble sounded too loud. Her soaked shoes slipped once, and a ripple of laughter moved through the younger nobles. Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she kept walking. Adrian's eyes never softened. At his right stood Serafina Marlowe, the daughter of one of the wealthiest bloodlines in Ethelgard. She was tall, elegant, wrapped in silver silk that skimmed her figure like water. Diamonds glittered at her ears. Her smile was small, sharp, and satisfied. Elara stopped at the base of the ceremonial steps. The mate bond pulsed once. "Please," her heart begged. Adrian looked down at her as though she were something that had crawled in from the rain. "Elara," he said, his voice smooth, amplified by the sacred stones beneath the arch. "For years, this pack has tolerated your presence out of mercy." A cold pressure settled over her chest. Someone laughed softly. "You were born without rank," he continued, "raised without discipline, given shelter, food, and protection by Silver Moon, though you have offered nothing in return." The words struck harder than a slap. Elara's mouth went dry. "Adrian?" His name escaped her as a broken whisper. His eyes flashed. "Do not interrupt me." Her wolf recoiled. The command carried alpha blood. It shoved against her bones, forcing her shoulders down, forcing silence into her throat. Pain bloomed behind her eyes. She fought to breathe. Adrian descended one step. "You know what tonight is. The Full Moon Alliance ceremony is not a place for weakness. It is not a place for fantasy. It is where the future of this pack is secured." Seraphina's fingers slid possessively around his arm. Elara saw the gesture, saw the claim in it, saw the truth before he spoke it. Still, some foolish, bleeding part of her waited for him to deny it. Adrian lifted his chin. I, Adrian Vale, heir of the Silver Moon Pack, reject Elara Vance as my fated mate. The world split open. The mate bond tore. It did not snap cleanly. It ripped through her like hooked wire dragged from the center of her chest. Elara gasped, but no air came. Fire raced through her veins, then ice, then a hollow, terrible emptiness that swallowed both. Her knees weakened. Her hand flew to her heart as if she could hold the pieces inside. Her wolf screamed. The sound was silent, trapped behind Elara's ribs, but she felt it in every bone. A keening, wounded cry. The sacred thread between them blackened, twisted, and burned. Adrian did not flinch. He reached for Seraphina's hand and raised it before the crowd. I choose Seraphina Marlowe as my bride and future Luna, a woman of dignity, strength, and noble blood, a woman worthy of Silver Moon. Applause erupted. It crashed over Elara like stones. Some clapped politely. Some cheered. Others watched her with open hunger, eager for the spectacle of an Omega being broken in public. Seraphina smiled wider, leaning into Adrian's side as if Elara's humiliation were a jewel placed at her feet. Elara could not move. The pain was too large for her body. Her vision blurred. The courtyard lights stretched into long silver streaks. She could smell rain on stone, perfume on silk, the metallic bite of her own blood where she had bitten through her lip. She could hear the elders murmuring approval. Could hear a girl near the front whisper, "Did she really think he would claim her?" Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice enough that only she could hear, though his expression remained perfectly composed for the crowd. You should be grateful, he said. A public rejection is more mercy than you deserve. Leave before you embarrass yourself further. Elara stared at him. For one terrible heartbeat, she saw the boy he had been superimposed over the man before her. Mud on his boots, sunlight in his hair, his hand reaching for hers in secret, his mouth against her forehead, promising forever. Then that ghost died. Something in her chest went quiet. She lowered her hand from her heart. The crowd waited for tears, for pleading, for a collapse that would entertain them. Elara gave them nothing. She turned. Her legs nearly failed on the first step, but she forced them forward. The applause continued behind her, swelling as Adrian placed a ceremonial kiss on Seraphina's knuckles. The sound followed Elara through the courtyard, through the archway of silver vines, down the long path lined with lanterns. No one stopped her. Of course no one stopped her. By the time she reached the outer grounds, the sky opened. Rain fell hard and sudden, a violent curtain that soaked through her dress in seconds. Thunder rolled over Ethelgard's hills. The lanterns behind her blurred into pale smears, then vanished as she stumbled beyond the estate gates and into the wild grass beyond. She did not know where she was going. Only away. Away from the music that had resumed. Away from the laughter. Away from Adrian's voice. Away from the place where her heart had been publicly cut from her body and displayed like proof of her worthlessness. The border woods rose ahead, the dark forest. Even Silver Moon warriors avoided it after sundown. It marked the forbidden edge of Ethelgard, where old magic clung to the roots and the boundary stones between territories had cracked with age. Children were told that wolves who entered never returned the same. Rogues hunted there. Spirits whispered there. Blood Eclipse scouts were said to drag trespassers north and leave only bones behind. Elara ran into it without slowing. Branches clawed at her arms. Mud sucked at her shoes. Rain hammered the leaves overhead, dripping down in cold streams that slid beneath her collar and along her spine. The forest swallowed the last traces of ceremony light, replacing silver elegance with black trunks, wet earth, and the raw green smell of crushed moss. Her lungs burned. The rejection pain came in waves. Each one drove her deeper into the trees. Sometimes it felt like claws closing around her heart, sometimes like a brand pressed into her soul. Her wolf whimpered, retreating into a darkness Elara could not reach. She tripped over a root and fell hard. Mud splashed across her cheek. Her palms struck stone. Skin split. For a moment, she stayed there on her hands and knees, rain pouring over her, breath coming in ragged sobs she could no longer hold back. The sound that left her was ugly. Not delicate. Not noble. It tore out of her with all the grief she had swallowed for years. Every insult. Every empty plate. Every locked door. Every time Adrian had looked at her in secret like she mattered, only to look through her in public like she was dirt beneath his boots. She pressed her forehead to the mud. "I hate you," she whispered. The storm swallowed the words. She did not know whether she meant Adrian, the moon goddess, the pack, or herself. A howl split the night. Elara froze. It was not the clean, proud howl of a hunting wolf. It was pain. Deep. Brutal. Almost inhuman. Her head lifted. Another sound followed. A low, wet snarl. Then the crash of something massive collapsing through brush. Every instinct screamed at her to run back the way she had come. Instead, Elara stood. Her knees shook. Rainwater streamed down her face. She wiped mud from her eyes and moved toward the sound, one cautious step at a time. The forest grew colder. The trees thinned near a ravine where black rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Lightning flashed, turning the world white. That was when she saw him. A wolf lay half in the mud, half against the stones. Not a normal wolf. He was enormous, larger than any alpha beast she had ever seen, with fur as black as midnight and shoulders thick with terrifying power. Even wounded, even collapsed, he seemed less like an animal than a living shadow torn from a nightmare. His claws had carved deep trenches in the mud. Steam rose faintly from his body where rain struck the heat of his blood. Blood. There was so much of it. Dark red pooled beneath him, diluted by rain into winding streams. Silver wounds burned across his flank and chest, the edges blackened, veins around them glowing faintly with poison. Silver. Not clean blade wounds. Not a hunter's mistake. These were deliberate, cruel, meant to kill slowly. The wolf's golden eyes snapped open. Elara stopped breathing. The power in that stare hit her like a physical force. Ancient, violent, royal. A growl rumbled from him, low enough to vibrate in her bones. She should have fled. Any sane wolf would have fled. Instead, Elara saw the tremor in his legs, the way his breath hitched, the way the silver poison crawled like molten frost beneath his skin. She saw pain being strangled beneath pride. And despite everything that had been done to her that night, something inside her answered. Not fear. Mercy. "You're dying," she whispered. The wolf bared his teeth. It should have been warning enough. His fangs were long, bloodied, capable of tearing out her throat before she could scream. But his head dropped back against the mud, strength failing. The glow in his eyes flickered. Elara stepped closer. "I know," she said, though he had not spoken. "You don't want help." The storm raged around them. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain plastered her hair to her cheeks and turned her torn dress nearly black. She knelt beside him. The wolf snarled again, but weaker this time. His claws flexed. One swipe would end her. Still, Elara reached toward the nearest wound. The scent of silver made her stomach twist. It was sharp and wrong, like burned metal and bitter herbs. When her fingers hovered above the poisoned flesh, pain sparked up her hand before she even touched him. Old fear whispered through her. "Do not show them what you can do." Her grandmother's voice. Frail, urgent, spoken years ago in the dark of the Omega quarters. "They fear old blood, little star. Silver moon kills what it cannot command. Hide your gift until the night your heart gives you no other choice." Elara's throat tightened. Her heart had been destroyed tonight. Perhaps that counted. She placed her palm against the wolf's wound. Agony shot through her. Elara cried out as silver poison bit into her magic, cold and vicious, trying to crawl beneath her skin. The wolf's body jerked. His eyes locked onto hers, wild with pain and fury. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, but you have to let me." She closed her eyes. Deep beneath the ruin of her rejected bond, beneath the ache Adrian had left behind, there was another power. Quiet, buried, waiting. Elara reached for it. At first, nothing came. Panic tightened her chest. She pushed harder, digging past fear, past humiliation, past the voice of every person who had ever called her useless. Her hands began to tremble. Rain slid between her fingers in the wolf's blood. Then, warmth bloomed in her palms. Soft gold light spilled through her skin. The wolf went utterly still. Elara exhaled shakily as the ancestral magic awakened. It did not feel like dominance. It did not feel like alpha command. It felt older than pack law. Older than bloodlines. Older than the carved stones of the ceremony courtyard. It moved through her like sunlight, through roots. The silver poison resisted. Black veins writhed beneath the wolf's skin. Elara gritted her teeth and pulled. The poison fought back, lashing into her arms with needles of ice. Her vision spotted. Her stomach lurched. She could taste metal on her tongue. "No," she whispered. The golden light brightened. The first wound began to close. Burned flesh softened. Torn muscle drew together thread by thread. The silver hissed as it surfaced, beating like liquid moonlight before falling into the mud in smoking droplets. The wolf's breath changed. Still harsh, still dangerous, but deeper now. Elara moved to the next wound, then the next. Each one took more from her. Her shoulders shook. Blood from her split palms mixed with his. The forest blurred at the edges. She felt the storm above, the mud below, the enormous pulse of the creature beneath her hands. And something else. A presence. The moment her magic reached the wound over his heart, the world stopped. The wolf's body convulsed. Bones shifted beneath her palm. Elara recoiled, falling backward into the mud as the massive black wolf began to change. Fur receded into skin. Claws drew back into powerful hands. The enormous body twisted, muscles rolling and reshaping with a violence that should have horrified her, but held her spellbound. Steam rose from him in the rain. The last of the golden light flickered over broad shoulders, a hard chest streaked with blood, and a face that made every story she had ever heard turn suddenly, terrifyingly real. Kaelen Cross, the Alpha King of the Northlands, the tyrant of Blood Eclipse. He was on one knee before her, naked from the shift, one hand braced in the mud, the other pressed against the nearly healed wound at his ribs. He was massive, even in human form, all brutal muscle and lethal stillness. A jagged scar cut over his left eye, pale against rain-slick skin. Black hair fell across his brow. His jaw was sharp, shadowed, clenched with pain. Elara could not move. Every wolf in Ethelgard knew his name. Mothers used it to frighten disobedient children. Warriors lowered their voices when speaking of him. He was the northern king who broke enemy alphas, burned traitor banners, and answered betrayal with blood. He was supposed to be merciless, untouchable. A monster wearing a crown of bones, his eyes lifted to hers, gold, burning gold. The last torn remnants of Elara's rejected bond went silent. Then something new ignited. It hit with the force of lightning. Not the fragile thread she had felt with Adrian. Not that pleading ache, that desperate need to be chosen. This was a storm crashing into her soul. A command written in blood and moonfire. A bond so powerful it stole the air from her lungs and remade the shape of the world around a single truth. Mate. Elara heard herself gasp. Kaelen's pupils widened. The forest seemed to bow beneath the weight of his stillness. Rain slid down his scarred face, over the hard line of his mouth, along the corded strength of his neck. His gaze moved over her mud-streaked cheeks, her torn dress, her bleeding hands, the raw pain still trembling through her body. Something savage darkened his expression. Not at her. for her. When he spoke, his voice was low, rough, and filled with a danger that made the shadows listen. "Who did this to you?" Elara's lips parted, but no answer came. Kaelen shifted closer. The movement was slow, controlled, as if he knew one sudden motion might send her running. Yet the power radiating from him was suffocating. Not like Adrian's command. Not like Silvermoon's cruelty. This was not power trying to crush her. This was power placing itself between her and the world. His nostrils flared. He scented the air. The rejected bond. The ceremony smoke. Adrian's lingering claim. Her blood. Her grief. A sound came from his chest. Not fully human. A growl, deep and lethal, rolling through the storm. Elara should have been afraid. Part of her was. But beneath that fear, beneath the exhaustion and heartbreak, her wolf lifted her head for the first time that night. Not whimpering. Watching. Kaelen Cross reached out, then stopped before touching her, his hand suspended inches from her face. His fingers were large, scarred, stained with blood that was both his and hers. His restraint seemed to cost him. "Elara," he said. Her name in his mouth was not an insult, not pity, not dismissal. It was recognition. She swallowed hard. "How do you know my name?" His eyes burned brighter. "Because my soul just learned it." Thunder cracked above them. Far behind her, beyond the trees, the music of the silver moon ceremony rose faintly on the wind, delicate and cruel. Adrian was probably dancing with Seraphina beneath the full moon. The pack was probably drinking to their future. No one would be searching for the Omega girl they had watched be discarded. Elara looked at the man before her. The enemy king. The wounded monster she had saved. The mate fate had hidden in the darkest part of the forbidden forest. Kaelen's gaze dropped to her trembling hands, then returned to her face. His expression hardened into something terrifyingly calm. "Tell me who rejected you," he said, "and I will decide whether to leave him breathing." The bond between them pulsed. This time it did not hurt. This time it answered. Dawn came without mercy. It dragged pale light over the trees, turning every wet branch silver, every puddle into a shard of broken sky. The storm had passed some time before sunrise, leaving the forbidden woods steaming with mist and rot and rain-soaked earth. Elara walked out of the dark forest with mud dried along her calves, blood crusted beneath her nails, and a silence in her chest that felt more dangerous than grief. She had not slept. Every time her eyes closed, she saw Kaelen Cross kneeling in the rain. "Who did this to you?" His voice had followed her through the last hours of darkness, low and lethal, vibrating through the new bond that now burned beneath her skin. Even after he had vanished into the trees to draw away whatever enemies had poisoned him, even after he had commanded her to return to Silver Moon and wait for him, Elara still felt him. Not as a plea. Not as a wound. As a presence. A black flame wrapped around her soul. By the time the Silver Moon camp rose ahead, the morning ceremony grounds had already changed. The marble courtyard had been stripped of its moonlit beauty. Servants dragged away wilted silver roses. Empty crystal cups lay overturned near the banquet tables. Noble guests lingered in clusters beneath white tents, gossiping over sweet wine and breakfast trays, as if last night's cruelty had been entertainment arranged for their pleasure. Elara stepped through the outer gate. The first person to see her was a kitchen servant carrying a basket of linens. The woman froze. Her gaze dropped to Elara's torn dress, the mud on her hem, the scratches on her arms, the wild, damp strands of hair clinging to her cheeks. Then the basket slipped from her hands. Gasps followed. One by one, faces turned. The dead Omega had returned from the dark forest. Whispers scattered through the camp like startled birds. "She survived? She went beyond the border stones. Look at her dress. Did rogues touch her? Maybe the forest spat her back out." Elara kept walking. Her whole body ached. The magic she had used on Kaelen had hollowed her out until each step felt like lifting stone. Her palms still burned where silver poison had tried to crawl through her veins. The rejected bond Adrian had severed was no longer bleeding, but the scar it left throbbed whenever she looked toward the ceremonial arch. She had thought returning would hurt more. Instead, as she crossed the courtyard where she had been humiliated hours before, she felt a strange distance. The white stones were the same. The banners were the same. The nobles were the same wolves who had clapped while her soul tore open. But something in her had shifted. Or perhaps something had finally awakened. "Elara Vance!" The voice cut across the courtyard. Adrian Vale stood at the steps of the Alpha Hall, dressed in fresh black and silver, every inch the polished air. Serafina stood beside him in pale morning silk, her golden hair swept over one shoulder, her expression curving with immediate disgust. Adrian looked rested. That was the first thing Elara noticed. He had slept after destroying her. He had danced, drank, accepted congratulations, gone to bed with his future laid out before him like a feast. The thought should have shattered her. Instead, it settled like ice. The crowd parted between them. Elara stopped in the center of the courtyard. Mud dripped from the torn edge of her dress onto the marble. Adrian's gaze moved over her slowly. The flicker of surprise in his eyes disappeared beneath contempt. "You have incredible nerve," he said. Elara said nothing. Her throat was raw from rain and grief. Her body trembled, but she refused to let him see whether it was weakness, exhaustion, or rage. Serafina descended one step, lifting her skirts to avoid a smear of mud near the marble. "Do you smell that?" she asked, wrinkling her perfect nose. Damp leaves, blood, border filth. Her eyes narrowed. She went into the dark forest and came back, carrying whatever sickness lives there. A murmur rolled through the pack. Adrian's expression hardened. "You crossed the forbidden border after being lawfully rejected," he said. "You abandoned pack grounds on the night of an alliance ceremony. You returned contaminated, unaccounted for, and possibly compromised by enemy territory." Elara's hands curled at her sides. "Compromised," she repeated quietly. His jaw flexed. "Do not take that tone with me." Once, alpha command in his voice would have forced her eyes down. This time, it struck something inside her and stopped. Not because she was stronger than him, because another power in her soul lifted its head. Kaelen. The bond pulsed once, dark and steady. Adrian's command slid off her like rain from stone. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Only for a breath. Then Serafina laughed. "Oh, look at her! One night in the woods, and she thinks she has dignity." She stepped closer, her diamonds catching the morning light. "You should be on your knees, thanking Adrian for letting you return long enough to hear your sentence." "My sentence?" Elara asked. Adrian lifted his chin. "As future Alpha, and with the approval of my father's council, I am declaring you banished from Silver Moon territory." The courtyard stilled. Elara had expected cruelty. Still, the words landed with cold finality. Banishment was not simply exile. Not for an Omega with no allies, no property, no pack mark of protection. It meant no shelter, no food, no passage rights, no right to appeal. Any scavenger wolves roaming the border could claim her body, and no one in Silver Moon would call it murder. Serafina's smile sharpened. "You should be grateful we are not executing you for trespassing near rival lands." Elara's breath came shallow. Adrian watched her closely, as if waiting for the collapse that had not come last night. "Leave by noon," he said. "If you are seen inside Ethelgard after the sun reaches its highest point, our patrols will drag you to the northern ravines and let the scavengers decide what to do with you." There it was. The ugliness beneath the noble clothes. Not discipline, not law, punishment. Because she had survived. Because she had walked back with her spine unbroken. Because some part of Adrian could sense that the girl he rejected was no longer lying dead at his feet. Elara looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how she had ever mistaken cowardice for kindness. "You rejected me," she said, voice hoarse but clear. Was that not enough? The courtyard inhaled. Adrian's eyes flashed with humiliation. Around them, nobles leaned in. Servants paused with trays in their hands. Even the elders watched from beneath the hall awning, their aged faces pinched with interest. Serafina's hand tightened around Adrian's arm. Adrian descended the steps until he stood before Elara. You mistake rejection for cruelty, he said softly. Cruelty would have been allowing you to keep dreaming above your station. Something cold moved through the crowd. Elara felt it. Not sympathy. Never that. Discomfort. Because this was no longer ceremonial. No longer polished. His mask was slipping, and everyone could see the pettiness beneath the air. Adrian seemed to realize it too late. His mouth tightened. Guards! 2 Silver Moon warriors stepped forward. Elara did not run. A strange calm settled over her as their hands clamped around her arms. Their fingers dug into bruises left by branches. One yanked hard enough to make her stumble. The crowd shifted aside as they began dragging her toward the outer gate. Serafina followed with delicate steps. Do be careful, she called. She may have fleas. Laughter broke out. Not loud at first, then easier, bolder. Alara's knees scraped stone when one guard pulled too fast. Pain lanced up her leg. Her dress tore at the side with a soft, humiliating sound. The laughter grew. Adrian did not laugh. That was worse. He watched with a grave, righteous expression, as if he were performing a duty rather than casting a wounded woman to her death. Elara lifted her head. The morning sky above the courtyard was pale blue. Then the light changed. A shadow passed over the sun. At first, no one noticed. Then came the sound. Deep, distant, rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. The laughter thinned. One noble looked up, then another. The shadow widened across the courtyard, swallowing the marble, the banners, the silver arch, the polished boots of the warriors dragging Elara away. The sound became thunder, not storm thunder. Machines. A servant screamed. The first military helicopter broke through the low clouds, black as a hunting hawk, its rotors chopping the morning into violent bursts of wind. Then a second appeared. A third. A fourth. They came from the north in perfect formation, their armored bellies marked with the dark eclipse insignia that every wolf in Aethelgard knew and feared. Blood Eclipse. The courtyard exploded into panic. Noblewomen shrieked and ducked beneath tables. Guards drew weapons with shaking hands. Elders shouted orders that vanished beneath the roar of engines. Silver moon banners snapped wildly as rotor winds slammed into the camp, scattering rose petals, documents, cups, and ceremonial ribbons across the marble. Alara's guards froze. Beyond the estate gates, a heavier sound rose. Engines. Armored convoys rolled through the outer road like a black tide. Steel-plated vehicles crushed the wet gravel beneath reinforced tires. Blood Eclipse warriors rode alongside them on massive dark wolves, their armor matte black, their eyes fixed forward with disciplined brutality. They did not rush. They did not need to. They arrived like judgment. The helicopters circled once, then descended around the camp perimeter. Armed warriors dropped from them on lines, landing with precision on walls, watchtowers, rooftops. Within moments, every exit was surrounded. Silver Moon had not been invaded. It had been contained. Adrian went white. For one shining, satisfying second, everyone saw it. The heir of Silver Moon, who had spoken of dignity, strength, and noble blood, stood frozen at the foot of his own hall with fear draining the arrogance from his face. His mouth opened, but no command came out. His warriors looked to him for orders, and he had none. Serafina's composure cracked first. "What is this?" she demanded, voice too high. "Adrian, do something!" Adrian swallowed. Elara heard it, even through the rotor thunder. Do something. The same man who had threatened to throw her to scavengers now looked as if he might collapse if a northern wolf breathed too close to him. A final helicopter descended into the center of the courtyard. The force of its landing wind drove everyone back. Everyone, except Elara. The guards holding her tried to retreat, dragging her with them. But then every Blood Eclipse rifle, blade, and wolf gaze in the courtyard turned toward their hands. The guards stopped breathing. The helicopter door opened. Kaelen Cross stepped out. The world seemed to bend around him. He wore black tactical armor fitted over a body built for war, his broad shoulders filling the doorway before his boots struck Silvermoon marble. A dark coat snapped behind him in the rotor wind. His black hair was tied back from his face, revealing the jagged scar over his left eye. The wounds Elara had healed were gone, but the memory of them seemed to have left something even more dangerous in their place. He was not the half-dead wolf from the forest now. He was the Alpha King of the Northlands. Every story was too small for him. His elite guard fanned out behind him, silent and lethal. No one spoke. No one dared. Even the helicopters seemed to fade beneath the pressure of his presence. Kaelen's eyes swept the courtyard once. Cold. Assessing. Absolute. Warriors lowered their gazes before he looked at them directly. Elders stepped back. Nobles who had laughed minutes ago now clutched one another in terrified silence. Adrian tried to recover. "King Cross," he called, voice strained but formal. "This is an unauthorized entry into Silvermoon territory. You have no right to bring armed forces into our camp." Kaelen did not even look at him. That was the first blow. Not a word. Not a glare. Not an acknowledgement. The most feared alpha in the Northern Territories walked past the Silvermoon air as if Adrian were furniture. The courtyard saw it. Elara saw Adrian's face tighten, then flush with helpless rage. Kaelen's gaze was fixed only on her. The guards holding Elara began to tremble. When Kaelen reached them, he stopped. He looked down at their hands on her arms. The temperature seemed to drop. "Release her," he said. 2 words. No shout. No visible anger. The command moved through the courtyard like a blade drawn from its sheath. The guards obeyed so fast one of them stumbled backward. Elara swayed, suddenly unsupported. Exhaustion rushed up to meet her. Kaelen caught her before she fell. His hand closed gently around her elbow. Gentle, despite the power in him. Careful, despite the murder in his eyes. Elara looked up. The bond between them surged with such force that her breath caught. Around them, everyone vanished for a heartbeat. The camp, the helicopters, Adrian, Serafina. All of it dimmed beneath the golden fire in Kaelen's gaze. "You came," she whispered. His expression tightened, as if the words hurt him. "I said I would." Behind him, someone made a strangled sound. Serafina. Her eyes had gone wide, fixed on Kaelen's hand touching Elara, as if she were precious. Adrian finally found his voice. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "That girl is a banished Omega of Silvermoon. She is under my jurisdiction." Kaelen went still. Slowly, he turned his head. The entire camp seemed to regret Adrian's existence. Kaelen's gaze landed on him. Adrian took half a step back before he could stop himself. Another blow, visible, public, unforgettable. Elara saw nobles notice it, saw warriors notice it, saw Serafina notice it, horror flickering across her elegant face as the man she had chosen revealed exactly how small he was beside a king. Kaelen's voice was quiet. "Your jurisdiction?" Adrian's throat worked. "She belongs to this pack." A growl rolled from the Blood Eclipse guard, low, unified, deadly. Kaelen's eyes darkened. "No," he said. "She does not." He turned back to Elara. Then, before the entire Silvermoon pack, before the elders, the nobles, the heir who had rejected her, and the fiancé who had mocked her, Kaelen Cross lowered himself to one knee. A gasp tore through the courtyard. Elara froze. The Alpha King knelt in the mud and shattered every hierarchy Silvermoon had ever used against her. He did not seem to notice the dirt on her dress. He did not seem to care that her hair was tangled, that her hands were scratched, that dried blood marked her skin. He took her bruised hand between both of his, holding it as if it were something sacred. Then he bowed his head and kissed her knuckles. The courtyard went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that followed a blade through the heart. Elara felt the warmth of his mouth against her skin, felt the tremor that moved through her body, not from fear this time, but from the impossible weight of being honored where she had been degraded. Kaelen lifted his head. His eyes did not leave hers as he spoke. "Who dares to exile my queen?" The words struck the courtyard harder than any weapon. "Queen?" Someone dropped a glass. It shattered across the marble. Serafina made a faint choking noise. Adrian looked as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. "No," he whispered. Kaelen rose slowly, still holding Elara's hand. Adrian shook his head. "No, that is impossible. She is an Omega. She has no rank, no bloodline, no claim." Kaelen's expression did not change. "You rejected her." Adrian flinched. The words were not accusation. They were fact. A fact now turned against him in front of everyone who had applauded it. "You publicly severed a sacred bond," Kaelen continued, voice cold enough to burn. "You humiliated her before your pack. You allowed your guards to drag her bleeding across stone. And now you speak to me of claim?" Adrian's face twisted. "She was mine to reject." Kaelen moved. No one saw him cross the distance. One moment he stood beside Elara. The next, Adrian was pinned against the ceremonial arch. Kaelen's hand locked around his throat, lifting him just enough that his polished boots scraped helplessly against the marble. Screams erupted. Silver Moon warriors surged forward. Blood Eclipse guards answered in perfect silence, weapons raised, wolves snarling. The Silver Moon warriors stopped. Adrian clawed at Kaelen's wrist, eyes bulging. Kaelen leaned in. "You had a treasure placed in your hands," he said softly, every word carrying. "And because you were too weak to recognize power without a title, you threw her into the dirt." Adrian choked. Kaelen's grip tightened a fraction. "Remember this feeling. The whole pack watching, your throat closing, your pride stripped bare. Remember it every time you think her name." Serafina stumbled down the steps. "Please," she said, all sharpness gone. King Cross, he did not understand. None of us understood. Kaelen's eyes flicked to her. Serafina stopped as if struck. "You understood enough to laugh." Her lips parted. No sound came. Kaelen released Adrian. The heir of Silver Moon collapsed to his knees, coughing, one hand at his throat, face flushed with terror and shame. The courtyard watched him struggle in the same place Elara had stood the night before. No applause came for him. No laughter saved him. No noble blood made him look less pathetic. Elara stared. A dark, bitter satisfaction unfurled inside her. Not because he was hurt, because now they all saw him. Not the shining heir. Not the perfect future alpha. Not the man who had been too high above her to love her publicly. A coward on his knees. Kaelen returned to Elara as if Adrian had already ceased to matter. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice changing when it reached her. Lower, rougher, almost tender. Elara tried to answer. Her knees chose that moment to weaken. Kaelen caught her again, and this time he did not let go. He slid one arm beneath her knees and the other around her back, lifting her against his chest as if she weighed nothing. Elara gasped, instinctively gripping his shoulder. His body was solid and warm beneath the black armor. The scent of rain, smoke, and dark pine wrapped around her, drowning out the lingering perfume of Silver Moon. A wave of murmurs broke through the courtyard. Kaelen ignored them all. Elara looked over his shoulder. Adrian was still on his knees. Serafina stood beside him, pale and rigid, her eyes fixed on Elara with something that looked terribly close to envy. That was the final blow. Not Kaelen's army, not Adrian's humiliation, not even the word queen. It was the sight of the woman who had mocked her, now watching her be carried like a treasure by the most powerful alpha in the Northlands. Elara did not smile. She did not need to. Her silence was sharper than victory. Kaelen carried her toward the waiting helicopter. Behind them, Silver Moon remained frozen in the ruins of its own arrogance. The banners still snapped. The marble still gleamed. The ceremonial arch still stood. But the pack had changed. Every wolf there knew it. The Omega they had laughed at had walked into the dark forest broken and returned claimed by a king. At the helicopter door, Kaelen paused. Without turning, he spoke to the Silver Moon elders. No one from this pack will follow. No one will search for her. No one will speak her name with disrespect again. An elder tried to lift his chin. And if Silver Moon refuses your command? Kaelen looked back. The elder paled. Then I return without restraint. No one answered. There was nothing to answer. Kaelen stepped into the helicopter with Elara in his arms. His guard followed, sealing the door as the rotors began to turn faster. Wind battered the courtyard again, forcing Silver Moon nobles to shield their faces. Through the window, Elara saw Adrian rise unsteadily. For one moment, their eyes met. Last night, his gaze had destroyed her. This morning, it could not reach her. Kaelen's arm tightened around her, not possessive enough to cage, but firm enough to promise that nothing below would touch her unless she allowed it. Elara turned away from Adrian. She looked at Kaelen instead. His golden eyes were already on her. You called me your queen, she said softly, barely audible beneath the engine roar. Kaelen's thumb brushed once over the back of her hand. You are. I was an Omega yesterday. His mouth curved, but there was no softness in it. Only certainty. Yesterday, they were fools. The helicopter lifted. Silver Moon fell away beneath them. The courtyard grew smaller. The nobles became pale dots. The banners became scraps of silver cloth. Adrian Vale, heir of Silver Moon, became nothing more than a figure standing in the wreckage of the morning he had thought belonged to him. Elara watched until the camp blurred beneath cloud and distance. Only then did her body begin to shake. Kaelen shifted her closer, shielding her from the cold glass and the eyes of his warriors. No one stared. No one whispered. Every Blood Eclipse guard kept their gaze respectfully forward, as if the mud-streaked girl in their king's arms had always been royal. That almost broke her more than cruelty had. Elara pressed her face against Kaelen's chest and closed her eyes. The bond between them pulsed again. Dark, warm, unbreakable. Below, Silver Moon drowned in silence. Above, the Northlands waited. The Northlands did not welcome gently. They rose from the mountains like the spine of some ancient beast, black stone ridges cutting into a sky heavy with snow clouds. As the helicopter descended through bands of mist, Elara saw forests stretching endlessly below, dark pine and frozen rivers and cliffs sharpened by wind. No silver banners, no marble courtyards, no delicate lanterns pretending cruelty was elegance. Everything here looked honest in its brutality. The fortress appeared at the edge of a mountain pass, enormous and severe, its walls carved from black granite veined with deep red mineral lines that glowed faintly beneath the winter sun. Watchtowers pierced the fog. Wolves moved along the ramparts, massive silhouettes with eyes like burning coals. Armored vehicles lined the lower gates. Blood Eclipse warriors stood in disciplined rows, their black armor swallowing the light. Elara's stomach tightened. This was the place Silver Moon mothers had whispered about when children misbehaved. The fortress of Kaelen Cross. The den of the northern tyrant. The home of wolves who did not negotiate, did not forgive, and did not leave enemies alive long enough to regret their choices. Elara sat very still beside Kaelen as the helicopter touched down on a landing platform dusted with frost. Her dress was still torn. Mud had dried into stiff patches over the skirt. Her hair had tangled around her face. Beneath the thin blanket Kaelen had wrapped around her during the flight, she felt small and visibly breakable. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Several Blood Eclipse guards approached at once, heads bowed, boots striking the landing platform in perfect rhythm. "My king!" the first said. Kaelen rose. The entire platform seemed to become aware of him. He had been silent for most of the flight, but not distant. Never distant. His arm had remained behind Elara's shoulders, shielding her from the cold glass and the curious glances of his warriors. When turbulence shook the helicopter, his hand had steadied her before she even realized she was swaying. When she coughed from exhaustion, he had wordlessly passed her water and glared at the guard sitting across from them until the man lowered his eyes in apology for somehow breathing too loudly. Now Kaelen stepped out first, then turned back and offered his hand. Elara hesitated. A dozen warriors watched, not openly. Blood Eclipse discipline was too precise for that. But she felt their attention, felt the weight of an entire kingdom trying to understand why their ruthless alpha king had brought home a mud-streaked girl in a torn dress and carried her from enemy territory like stolen treasure. Kaelen's gaze sharpened. Not at her. At them. Every guard immediately looked away. Elara blinked. Kaelen extended his hand another inch. Come. It was not a command. That startled her more than if it had been one. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and careful, engulfing her chilled skin. The bond between them pulsed at the contact, a low golden warmth moving beneath her ribs. Elara stepped onto the platform, and her knees threatened to fold as soon as her feet touched stone. Kaelen caught her. His arm slid around her waist. The nearest guard made the mistake of looking up too quickly. Kaelen's head turned. The guard went rigid. Is there something you wish to see? Kaelen asked. The man's face drained of color. No, my king. Then why are your eyes on my mate? The words fell softly. The temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. The guard sank to one knee so fast his armor struck the platform with a hard crack. Forgive me. Elara's cheeks heated despite the cold. Kaelen! His gaze cut back to her, still dark with violence. He was only surprised, she murmured. He has eyes. That is usually not a crime. It becomes one when he forgets where to place them. A strange, breathless sound escaped her. It took Elara a second to realize it was almost a laugh. Kaelen stared at her. The lethal tension in his shoulders faltered. For one suspended moment, the feared Alpha King looked as if he had been struck somewhere more dangerous than the battlefield. His eyes moved over her face, searching, absorbing the faint curve at the edge of her mouth like it was an omen. You are laughing at me, he said. I am not. You are. You threatened a man for having functioning vision. He was careless with it. This time the laugh slipped out fully, small and tired and fragile, but real. The warriors around them did not move. Elara had the sudden feeling that no one in the Blood Eclipse pack had heard anything like that directed at their king before. Kaelen's expression did not soften in any obvious way. His face remained severe, scarred, carved from winter and war, but his thumb brushed once over her hand, so lightly she might have imagined it. Good, he said. What? You can still laugh. The words settled into her chest. Not as flirtation. Not as possession. Relief. He had wanted proof that Silver Moon had not destroyed every bright thing in her. Elara looked away first, because the intensity in his eyes was too much to bear, while her heart was still learning how to beat around him. Kaelen led her into the fortress. Inside, the Northlands stronghold was warmer than she expected. Fires burned in iron braziers along the walls, thick rugs covered black stone floors. Carved beams arched overhead, marked with ancient symbols and battle oaths. Everything was massive, practical and severe, but not neglected. Weapons hung polished. Windows were clean despite the mountain storms. Guards moved with purpose. Servants did not cower when Kaelen passed, though they bowed deeply. They feared him. But it was not the thin, hungry fear Elara had known in Silver Moon. It was the fear one gave a storm, a mountain, a weapon that would never turn on those it was sworn to protect unless they betrayed it first. A woman with dark hair braided tightly against her skull approached from the great hall. She wore healer's gray beneath a black cloak and carried herself with quiet authority. My king, she said, the royal chambers have been prepared. The bath is ready. Food will arrive within the hour. Kaelen's hand tightened around Elara's. And the physician? I am here. His eyes narrowed. I said physician, Mara, not battlefield medic. The woman did not flinch. I have stitched your intestines back into your body twice. I believe I can examine bruises. Elara's brows lifted before she could stop them. Kaelen looked deeply displeased. Mara glanced at Elara, and something like warmth flickered in her gaze. "You must be Elara." Elara instinctively lowered her eyes. "Yes!" The silence that followed was immediate. Kaelen went still beside her. Mara's expression sharpened, not with judgment, but with understanding. "No," Kaelen said. Elara looked up, startled. His jaw was locked. "You do not lower your eyes in my house. I didn't mean— I know what you meant." His voice was quiet, controlled, and somehow more devastating than anger. "That is why I am telling you. Never again." Elara swallowed. In Silver Moon, looking directly at someone of higher rank could earn a slap, a command, a punishment disguised as discipline. Here, Kaelen sounded as if the act of her lowering her gaze was an insult against something sacred. Mara's voice softened. "Come, let me tend to you." Kaelen did not move. Mara sighed. "Alone, Kaelen?" "No." "My king?" "No." Elara looked between them. Mara pinched the bridge of her nose. "She may not want a half-feral alpha looming over her while I check her injuries." Kaelen turned to Elara at once. "Do you want me gone?" The question was blunt. Too blunt. But beneath it lay something raw enough to stop her breath. He would leave if she asked. Not happily. Not calmly. But he would. Elara had spent her life with men who took obedience and called it protection. Kaelen Cross, monster of the Northlands, was asking. She tightened the blanket around her shoulders. "You can stay," she said softly. The tension in him eased by a fraction. Mara muttered, "Moon, save us all," and led them through the fortress. The royal chambers were larger than the entire Omega quarters Elara had slept in at Silver Moon. A fire roared in a carved hearth. Heavy curtains framed tall windows overlooking a valley of black pines. A copper tub steamed behind a folding screen. Fresh clothes had been laid across a chair, soft wool, clean linen, a deep blue robe lined with fur. Elara stared at the clothing. "For me?" Kaelen looked as if the question offended him. "Who else would they be for?" "Carmine. They're too fine. They are clothes. They look expensive. They are still clothes." Mara snorted under her breath. Elara touched the sleeve of the robe, unable to stop herself. The fabric was impossibly soft beneath her fingertips. A simple thing. A garment with no patches, no stains, no old scent of someone else's body in the seams. Her vision blurred without warning. She turned away quickly. Kaelen saw anyway. Of course he saw. He crossed the room in 2 strides, then stopped just short of touching her. "Elara, I'm fine. That is the worst lie I have ever heard." A wet laugh broke from her throat, almost a sob. Mara, mercifully, busied herself unpacking salves and clean cloths near the fire. Kaelen lowered his voice. "Tell me what you need." The question undid her. Not because it was grand, not because it was poetic, because no one had asked her that before and meant it as something she was allowed to answer. Elara wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know," she whispered. Kaelen's expression changed then. The brutality did not leave him. It never truly left. But something moved beneath it. Something wounded and protective and furious at a world that had trained her not to know the shape of her own needs. He looked at Mara. "Leave the supplies." "My king." "I will tend to her." Mara stared at him. A log cracked in the hearth. "You," Mara said slowly, "will tend to her wounds." "Yes. You once tried to cauterize your own shoulder with a dagger heated in a campfire because you said waiting for me was inefficient. That was different. You passed out standing up. That is not relevant." Elara pressed her lips together. Kaelen noticed immediately. "You find that amusing?" "No." "Elara, a little." Mara's mouth twitched. Kaelen looked between them both, clearly aware he was being mocked and deeply unaccustomed to having no desire to punish it. "Leave," he told Mara. This time, the healer obeyed, though she paused at the door to give Elara a look that somehow managed to be reassuring, amused, and slightly apologetic all at once. When the door closed, the chamber became very quiet. Too quiet. Elara suddenly heard the fire, the wind against the windows, the faint clink of armor from the hall beyond, her own breathing. Kaelen stood several feet away, giving her space with the rigid discipline of a man holding back a war. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know. You have servants. Yes. Healers. Yes. A kingdom. Technically." Her lips twitched again. His eyes fixed on the movement. "That pleases you," he said. "What?" "When I answer badly." "You don't answer badly. You answer like every sentence is a military report. I am precise. You are impossible." "Good." That was not a compliment. It sounded like one when you said it. Elara shook her head, and for a moment, the room felt warmer. Then Kaelen picked up a clean cloth, dipped it in a basin of warm water, and approached with the caution of a wolf nearing an injured bird. "May I?" The words were rough. Elara looked at the cloth, then at his hands. Large, scarred, capable of tearing through enemies, snapping bone, commanding armies. Waiting. She nodded. Kaelen sat before her, not on the chair beside her, but on the floor at her feet. The position stunned her into silence. This was the Alpha King, the ruler of the Blood Eclipse pack, a man who had made Silvermoon tremble by entering a courtyard. And he knelt to clean mud from her ankle. His touch was careful to the point of pain. Not physical pain, something deeper. He cleaned the scrape along her shin first, jaw tightening as the wound appeared beneath the dirt. Then the bruise at her knee, then the cuts on her palms. Every time he found another mark, the air around him grew heavier. "They did not all happen last night," he said. It was not a question. Elara looked down at his bent head. "No." His hand stilled. "How long?" She tried to shrug. "I don't remember when it started." The cloth tore in his grip. Elara flinched. Kaelen instantly released it. His eyes lifted to hers, and the violence in them was terrifying, but not directed at her. Never at her. "I frightened you." "A little." "I am sorry." Those 3 words, spoken by that man, in that voice, did something strange to her chest. "You don't have to be sorry for being angry," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I do when my anger touches you." Elara had no answer. He took another cloth and continued more slowly. When he reached the old scar near her wrist, his thumb paused beside it. It was thin and pale, half hidden beneath the ribbon she had worn for years. "Who?" he asked. Elara knew exactly what he meant. "A kitchen overseer. I dropped a tray." Kaelen's face became unreadable. "That scar is not from a tray." "No." The fire popped. "He said Omegas needed reminders." Kaelen rose. The movement was so controlled it was worse than an explosion. Elara caught his wrist before she knew she was going to move. His gaze snapped to her hand. "Don't," she said. "I have not said what I intend to do. You didn't need to. He marked you. He is not worth blood." Kaelen looked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he sat again. "For you," he said. "I will wait." Elara's fingers were still around his wrist. She released him. The warmth of his skin remained in her palm. He finished cleaning her wounds in silence. When he spread healing salve over her bruised shoulder, his fingers barely touched her. Yet every brush sent awareness moving through the bond, warm and electric, filling spaces inside her she had believed permanently cold. She should have been terrified. A day ago, Adrian's rejection had made the word mate feel like a curse. Now Kaelen's nearness made it feel like standing before a locked door with sunlight pouring through the cracks. He wrapped the final bandage around her palm. "There," he said. Elara looked at the bandage, neat and surprisingly perfect. "You've done this before. War creates many opportunities. That is the darkest way you could have said yes." "I am a dark man." She studied him, the scar over his left eye, the hard mouth, the shoulders that carried command like armor, the hands that had just cleaned her wounds as if touching anything painful on her skin required reverence. "No," she said softly. His gaze lifted. "You are not what they said." Kaelen went very still. Something old and guarded moved behind his eyes. "And what did they say?" "That you were a monster." "I am? I don't think monsters ask permission." His throat worked once. For the first time, Elara saw him without the king, without the legend, without the terror others had built around his name. Just a man sitting at her feet, holding a bowl of cooling water, looking at her as if she had reached into the darkest part of him and touched something he had buried long ago. A knock struck the door. Kaelen's face closed immediately. "What?" he barked. The door opened a cautious inch. A young male guard stepped inside with a tray of food, eyes lowered so hard he seemed to be examining the floor grain. "Food, my king." Kaelen stood. The guard's gaze flicked once toward Elara by accident. Once. Kaelen's growl filled the chamber. The guard nearly dropped the tray. Elara covered her face with her unbandaged hand. "Kaelen!" He looked. "He is bringing soup. He can bring it blind. That would make a mess. He can leave it outside. He is already inside. An error he will not repeat." The guard whispered, "Never, my king." Elara could not help it. She laughed again. Kaelen turned on her with the full weight of his offended dignity. "You encourage incompetence. I encourage soup." The guard looked like a man witnessing a myth collapse. Kaelen took the tray from him with one hand. "Out!" The guard fled. When the door closed, Elara was still smiling. Kaelen placed the tray beside her. "You enjoy testing me." "I think you enjoy being tested. I enjoy many things about you." The smile faded from her lips. The air shifted. Kaelen seemed to realize what he had said only after it landed between them. His expression remained controlled, but the bond betrayed him. Heat moved through it. Not crude, not careless. Deep. Focused. Want restrained so fiercely it became its own kind of tenderness. Elara's pulse fluttered. "What things?" she asked before courage could abandon her. Kaelen's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "Your mercy," he said. "Your defiance. Your terrible instinct to put yourself between death and a stranger. You were not exactly a stranger after you turned human. No. Then I became a complication. A very large one." His mouth almost curved. Almost. "Eat," he said, voice rougher. Elara obeyed, mostly because her body chose that moment to remind her she had not eaten since before the ceremony. The soup was hot, rich with herbs and tender meat. She tried not to devour it. Failed. Kaelen watched with an expression that grew darker each time she flinched, as if expecting someone to take the bowl away. When she finished, he pushed bread toward her. She ate that too. Then fruit. Then tea sweetened with honey. By the time she leaned back, warmth had spread through her limbs. Exhaustion pulled at her, but beneath it something else stirred. A glow. At first, Elara thought it was the fire reflecting on her skin, a faint shimmer over the bandages, a pulse of warmth beneath the healing salve. But when she flexed her fingers, the light moved with her. Kaelen saw it. His posture changed. "What is that?" she whispered. He reached for her hand, then stopped. "Does it hurt?" "No." "What does it feel like?" Elara closed her eyes. The warmth expanded through her palm, up her wrist, into her chest. Not like the healing magic she had used in the forest. That had been pulled from deep underground, difficult and draining, a buried spring forced through stone. This was different. This wanted out. "It feels like sunrise," she said. Kaelen's expression sharpened. Before he could answer, a horn sounded from somewhere beyond the fortress walls. Long, low, urgent. Elara sat straighter. "What is it?" "Training yard alarm." He was already moving toward the door. Elara pushed to her feet too quickly. The room tilted. Kaelen caught her without looking, as if her body's balance were now a law he could sense. "You are staying here. I heard the alarm, and I issued an instruction." "You asked me not to lower my eyes in your house. Does that come with the right to disobey?" His eyes narrowed. For one heartbeat, They stared at each other. Then Kaelen muttered something under his breath, in a language Elara did not know. "It sounded like you lost," she said. "I never lose." "You are opening the door." "I am adapting." He wrapped the fur-lined robe around her shoulders himself and led her through the corridors with one arm at her back, as if the entire fortress might offend him by existing too near her. Guards fell into step behind them. Servants pressed themselves to the walls, not in terror of Elara, but in shock at the sight of their king personally escorting a woman in borrowed robes and bandaged hands through the heart of Blood Eclipse power. The training yard lay inside the eastern wall, open to the mountain air. Snow had begun to fall in thin, bright flakes. Dozens of warriors stood around a central arena where younger fighters had been drilling in wolf and human form. Now the ground was chaos. A wooden training structure had collapsed near the far side of the yard. Splintered beams lay across the snow. Several warriors strained to lift a heavy crossbar while others shouted orders. Beneath it, a young wolf lay trapped in partial shift, one leg crushed, silver training wire tangled around his body. The wire was not meant to kill, only to teach recruits how to resist restraint. But something had gone wrong. The silver had cut deep. The boy's scream tore through the yard. Elara's body moved before thought. Kaelen caught her arm. "No." She looked at him. "He's dying." "Healers are coming. They won't be fast enough." His grip tightened. "You are not recovered." The boy screamed again. Elara felt it in her bones. The warmth inside her surged. Not a request. A command. She pulled free of Kaelen's hand. For the first time, he let her go. Elara ran across the snow barefoot beneath the robe, ignoring the bite of ice against her soles. Warriors moved to stop her until they saw Kaelen behind her and wisely chose life. She dropped beside the injured recruit. He could not have been older than 16. His face was pale, eyes wild with agony, claws scraping uselessly at the frozen ground. Silver wire smoked where it touched his skin. Blood spread beneath him in a dark fan. "It hurts," he gasped. "I know." Elara placed a hand near his face. "Look at me." His eyes snapped to hers. The courtyard fell quiet. Something in her voice had changed. Elara felt it too. A resonance beneath the words. Not alpha command, not dominance. Something gentler and older, impossible to disobey because it did not crush the will. It steadied it. "Breathe," she said. The boy breathed. Kaelen stopped several paces behind her. Elara placed both hands on the silver wire. Pain should have come. It did, but this time it did not consume her. The silver burned, sharp and furious, yet the light inside her answered with a force so vast she nearly cried out. Gold spilled across her fingers, then white, then something brighter than either, a platinum radiance that filled the yard and turned each falling snowflake into a star. The wire snapped. Every wolf present recoiled. Elara did not notice. She pressed her hands against the boy's crushed leg and poured herself into the wound. The old seal inside her broke. There was no sound at first, only light. It burst from her chest, her hands, her eyes. The bandages around her palms unraveled and burned away without flame. Her hair lifted in a wind no one else felt. The snow stopped falling around her, suspended in the platinum glow. Then her wolf rose. Not from pain, from glory. Elara arched back as power flooded through her body. Too much for skin, too much for fear, too much for every small name Silver Moon had ever forced upon her. Omega, outcast, useless, unworthy, all of them shattered. Her shift came like dawn breaking over a battlefield. Bone and light and breath remade her. The robe fell away as her body changed, but the radiance covered her, sacred and blinding. Where a small, weakened wolf should have emerged, something legendary stepped into the snow. A platinum spirit wolf. The training yard bowed beneath silence. She was luminous. Her fur shone like moonlight caught in living silver, each strand tipped with pale gold. Her eyes burned white blue, ancient and compassionate and terrible. Spirit markings glowed along her legs, chest, and brow in patterns older than any pack crest. Around her paws, The snow melted into clear water, and from that water tiny white flowers pushed through frozen ground. The injured boy stopped screaming. His bones drew back into place. The gashes closed. The silver burns vanished. A breath later he was healed. Not stabilized. Healed. He stared up at her with tears on his face. Every warrior in the yard dropped to one knee. The sound was thunderous, armor striking stone, heads bowed, wolves lowering themselves into the snow. Elara stood over the boy, breath steaming in the cold, the platinum light pulsing from her like a second sun. Her senses expanded with terrifying clarity. She could feel every heartbeat in the yard, every old scar, every hidden sickness, every grief carried beneath armor and discipline. And beyond them all, she felt Kaelen. He had not knelt. He stood frozen, staring at her, as if the world had ended and begun again in the same breath. Elara turned toward him. For the first time since she had met him, the Alpha King of the Northlands looked shaken, not afraid, never afraid, awed. His eyes burned gold, reflecting her light. His wolf pressed beneath his skin, not in challenge, but in recognition. The bond between them blazed so fiercely the air seemed to hum. Elara took one step toward him. The warriors kept their heads bowed. Kaelen did not move until she stood before him, radiant and enormous, her muzzle level with his chest. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee. The king knelt again. But this time it was not to make a statement before enemies. This was reverence. Elara, he said, voice rough with wonder. Her name trembled through the bond. Not Omega, not broken, not charity, not even only mate. Something older, something holy. Kaelen lifted one hand, stopping just before he touched the luminous fur along her face. May I? The question nearly broke her. Even now, even like this, even when she could feel power enough inside her to heal armies and command legends awake from stone, he still asked. Elara lowered her head into his palm. The moment he touched her, the platinum light softened. It wrapped around him, threading through the scar over his eye, across the old battlefield wounds hidden beneath his armor, into the places no healer had ever reached, because no one had ever been allowed close enough to try. Kaelen inhaled sharply. Elara felt the pain inside him. Not physical. Loneliness sharpened into discipline. Grief buried beneath conquest. A boy forged into a weapon because his kingdom had needed one. A man called monster so often he had stopped denying it. Her wolf pressed gently into his hand. The light warmed. Kaelen's eyes closed. Around them, the entire Blood Eclipse pack remained on its knees. When he opened his eyes again, they were darker with emotion than she had ever seen them. They called you an Omega, he said. Alara's wolf huffed softly. The sound made several nearby warriors flinch, though Kaelen's mouth curved with something almost like pride. He leaned closer, resting his forehead briefly against hers. They were blind, he whispered. The bond answered him in a wave of warmth. Elara shifted back slowly, the platinum glow folding around her like silk. When she returned to human form, Kaelen was already removing his coat. He wrapped it around her before the light fully faded, shielding her from the cold and every gaze in the yard. This time, no one dared look. Not because Kaelen threatened them, because they were still bowing. Elara stood barefoot in the snow, swallowed by his black coat, shaking from power and shock. Kaelen's hands settled on her shoulders, steadying her. What am I? She whispered. His gaze moved over her face as if he were memorizing a miracle. My mate, he said first. The possessive warmth in the words sent a tremor through her. Then his expression changed, deepening into something solemn. And more than that. The healed recruit crawled forward on shaking limbs and pressed his forehead to the snow before her. My queen, he whispered. My life is yours. Alara's breath caught. One by one the warriors echoed him. My queen, my queen, my queen. The words spread through the yard, not shouted, not forced, but sworn. Elara looked at Kaelen, overwhelmed. I don't know how to be that. His hands tightened gently on her shoulders. Good. She blinked. Good? His mouth curved faintly. Anyone eager for power should never hold it. The answer was so grimly sincere that a laugh escaped her, despite the tears rising in her eyes. Kaelen's gaze softened in that barely visible way she was beginning to recognize. There she is, he murmured. Who? My impossible queen. Elara shook her head, still trembling. You make it sound like I planned this. No, you ran barefoot into a training accident after nearly dying from exhaustion. Planning was clearly absent. That sounded like criticism. It was terror. Her smile faded. Kaelen did not hide from what he had said. He looked down at her, surrounded by kneeling warriors and melting snow and the fading glow of the impossible power inside her, and let her see the truth. You frightened me, he said. Not because of what you are. Because for one moment, I thought saving someone else might cost me you. Elara's heart clenched. She reached for him before she could lose courage, placing her bandage-free hand against the scar over his left eye. His entire body went still. I am here, she whispered. His eyes closed for half a breath. When they opened, the king was back, but now she knew what lived beneath the crown of shadow. Kaelen turned to his pack, one hand still anchoring Elara beneath his coat. Rise, he commanded. The warriors obeyed. Their eyes remained lowered, not in fear alone now, but devotion. Kaelen looked across the yard, his voice carrying to every wall, every tower, every wolf within hearing distance. Let the Northlands know what Silver Moon discarded. The pack listened. Kaelen's gaze returned to Elara. His voice dropped, but somehow it carried more power than a shout. They threw away a goddess among wolves. Elara felt the platinum warmth answer beneath her skin. For the first time in her life, she did not shrink from the words. She stood beside the rival king, wrapped in his coat, snow melting at her feet, while the fortress that had once seemed monstrous bowed around her. And deep within her soul, her spirit wolf lifted her luminous head and howled. The Northlands knew war before it knew peace. Its mountains had been carved by ancient glaciers and older bloodshed. Its fortress had endured sieges, betrayals, famine winters, rogue uprisings, and the long, vicious hatred of southern packs who called Blood Eclipse savage because they feared what they could not control. But for 7 days after Elara's awakening, the fortress changed. Not softly. The Northlands did not know how to be soft. But something brighter moved through its stone halls. Warriors who had spent their lives bowing only to strength now lowered their heads when Elara passed. Not because Kaelen ordered it, but because they remembered the platinum wolf standing in the snow, healing a dying boy with light powerful enough to make the mountains seem small. Elara still did not know what to do with reverence. She had known contempt. She had known hunger, cold floors, locked cupboards, and the careful art of making herself invisible. She had known the sting of public rejection and the sharper humiliation of being pitied by people who had helped break her. Reverence was harder. It followed her in the corridors, in the training yard, in the great hall where Blood Eclipse wolves rose when she entered. It followed her in Mara's quiet smile, in the healed recruits' trembling devotion, in the way the fortress servants began leaving white flowers outside her chamber door because flowers had bloomed beneath her paws when the spirit wolf awakened. Kaelen watched all of it with the grim satisfaction of a man who had been waiting for the world to correct itself. Elara watched him too often. He was impossible not to watch. The Alpha King moved through his fortress like the dark center of every room. Warriors straightened when he passed. Commanders lowered their voices. Enemies would have mistaken his silence for cruelty, but Elara was beginning to read the language of him. The slight turn of his head when she entered. The way his shoulders eased when she laughed. The way his hand always hovered near her back in crowded spaces, never quite touching unless she leaned into him first. And the way his possessiveness remained absolutely unreasonable. On the 8th morning, a young weapons master made the mistake of smiling too warmly while handing Elara a practice blade. Kaelen appeared behind her like a storm given human form. The weapons master's smile died. "Elara," Kaelen said. She did not turn. "Yes?" "Why is he smiling?" "Because I thanked him." "He can be thanked without exposing teeth." The weapons master paled. Elara pressed her lips together. "Kaelen?" "He has been instructed. He handed me a knife. And survived. He should be grateful." The weapons master whispered, "I am my queen." Elara sighed, though warmth tugged at the corner of her mouth. The old Elara would have flinched beneath so much attention. The old Elara would have apologized for existing too close to anyone important. But every day in the Northlands placed another stone beneath her feet. Every careful touch from Kaelen, every respectful bow, every moment she felt the spirit wolf glowing patiently beneath her skin, built something steadier in her. Not arrogance, never that. Certainty. She was not the girl Adrian had discarded. Perhaps she had never been. Perhaps Silver Moon had only taught her to mistake captivity for identity. That certainty was tested on the 9th night. Kaelen had gone to the western ridge before dusk to inspect the outer defense lines. He had taken half a dozen commanders, refusing a full guard because the fortress walls were secure, and because, as Mara muttered after he left, the man believes being difficult is a military strategy. By midnight, snow began to fall. Elara woke before the alarm. She sat upright in Kaelen's bedchamber, one hand pressed to her chest. The bond burned wrong. Not broken, not weakened, strained. Somewhere beyond the walls, Kaelen was in pain. Elara threw off the blankets. The room was dark except for the dying fire in the hearth. Wind pressed snow against the tall windows. For 1 second, she stood barefoot on the black stone floor, listening to the fortress breathe. Then the first explosion hit the eastern gate. The walls shook. A second blast followed. Then screaming. Horns roared through the fortress, low and violent, dragging Blood Eclipse from sleep into war. Boots thundered in the corridors. Wolves howled from the ramparts. Somewhere below, steel gates slammed into place. Elara ran. She did not wait for a cloak, did not wait for guards. Her nightdress snapped around her legs as she flew down the corridor, platinum heat already rising beneath her skin. Mara appeared at the stairwell, healer's coat thrown over her sleeping clothes, a blade in her hand. "My queen! Where is Kaelen?" "Western Ridge." The patrol signal went dark moments before the attack. Alara's blood turned cold. A trap. The eastern gate was smoke and chaos. By the time Elara reached the inner battlements, the fortress courtyard had become a battlefield of firelight and snow. Blood Eclipse warriors surged into defensive lines, but the attack had been planned for treachery, not honor. Silver Moon raiders had breached the outer service tunnel with stolen codes, then detonated silver-laced charges along the gate hinges. Smoke rolled through the lower yard, burning with the bitter metallic reek of poison. Silver. The cowards had brought silver into the Northlands. Alara's hands curled against the stone rail. Through the smoke, she saw the invading forces. Not an army large enough to win a true war. An army desperate enough to gamble on murder. Silver Moon warriors poured through the broken tunnel in pale armor, their blades coated in silver toxin, their faces wild beneath moon-marked helmets. Behind them came mercenaries, scavenger wolves, border trash bought with coin and promises. Creatures Adrian would have called beneath him if he had not needed them to die first. And at the center of them, riding through the smoke on a white werewolf, was Adrian Vale. For one moment, Elara felt nothing. No heartbreak, no grief, no trembling echo of the bond he had torn apart beneath the full moon. Only recognition. A rat had returned to gnaw at the door of a throne room. Adrian lifted his sword toward the fortress steps. "Kaelen Cross is weakened," he shouted. "The tyrant bleeds on the western ridge. Take the fortress before his guard can regroup. Seize the Witch Queen, and Silver Moon will rise above the Northlands tonight." A roar answered him. Elara stared. Witch Queen. Once, he had called her worthless. Now he feared her enough to rename her. A Blood Eclipse commander rushed to her side. "Sure. My queen, you must go to the inner sanctuary. The king ordered that if the fortress was ever breached—" "No!" The commander froze. Elara's voice had not been loud. It did not need to be. The platinum warmth beneath her skin sharpened into command. Not alpha pressure. Not domination. Something older and cleaner. The commander bowed before he seemed to realize he had moved. Elara looked toward the western ridge. Through the bond, she felt Kaelen's pain flare again. Silver poison, rage, restraint. He was alive, but weakened, trapped in battle away from the gate, while Adrian tried to gut his home from behind. A cold calm settled over Elara. Adrian had expected Kaelen. He had prepared for the Monster King. He had forgotten the woman he threw away. Elara descended the stairs. Every Blood Eclipse warrior who saw her tried to stop her. None could. Not because she shoved them aside. Not because she threatened them. They simply parted. Some instinct deeper than rank told them to move as their queen walked barefoot through smoke, snow, and falling ash toward the broken gate. Adrian saw her when she reached the center of the courtyard. His face changed. Triumph first, then hunger, then something uglier. "There she is," he called, smiling with the feverish brightness of a man who had mistaken madness for destiny. "Elara, look at you, dressed in borrowed power." Silvermoon warriors laughed around him. The sound died quickly when Blood Eclipse did not laugh with them. Elara stopped 20 paces away. Her nightdress was white, the hem already darkened by soot and melting snow. Her hair fell loose over her shoulders. She carried no weapon. Adrian's smile widened. "You should have stayed in the dirt where I left you," he said. "This little fantasy ends tonight. Cross is dying. His fortress is breached. His warriors are scattered. And you—" His eyes moved over her, lingering in a way that made the bond inside her recoil with disgust. "You are coming back with me." The courtyard went silent. A deep growl rolled through every Blood Eclipse throat. Elara only looked at him. Adrian's smile twitched. "Do you hear me?" he snapped. "You belong to Silvermoon." "No," Elara said. One word. The air shifted. Snow stopped falling around her. Adrian's wolf lowered beneath him, whining softly. Elara took one step forward. "You rejected me before your pack." Another step. "You banished me." Another. "You dragged me across stone and threatened to throw me to scavengers." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. That made it worse. Adrian's grip tightened on his sword. "Elara! You came here because you thought Kaelen was the only power standing between you and what you wanted." The platinum light began beneath her feet. At first, it was only a shimmer across the snow. Then it spread. Warriors stepped back. The courtyard stones glowed white gold beneath her soles, ancient markings flaring awake where no markings had been carved. The broken gate groaned. The silver poison smoking in the air hissed, recoiling from her light. Adrian's face drained. "Elara." She looked at him then, and for the first time, he seemed to understand that she was not speaking as the girl he had abandoned. She was speaking as the thing his cruelty had failed to kill. "You should have stayed afraid," she said. The seal inside her did not break this time. It opened. Elara shifted in a blaze of holy light. The force of it slammed outward in a silent wave. Silvermoon raiders were thrown from their feet. Mercenaries screamed and shielded their eyes. Scavenger wolves tried to flee, only to collapse as the sacred radiance tore the poison and violence from their blood, leaving them weak and shaking in the snow. The platinum spirit wolf stepped from the light. She was blinding. Larger than before. Brighter. Her fur shone like 1,000 full moons woven into living silver, but her eyes were not soft. They burned with the merciless purity of dawn over a battlefield. Spirit markings streamed along her body like divine script. Around her, snow melted into clear water, and the water reflected stars that were not in the sky. Blood Eclipse fell to one knee behind her. The invaders began to panic. Adrian's white wolf reared, throwing him hard into the snow. The platinum wolf moved. She did not fight like a beast. She judged. A wave of light swept from her body and struck the first line of Silver Moon warriors. Their silver blades shattered. Their armor split at the seams. The poison they had carried into the fortress burned away in white fire. Those who had come only as frightened soldiers collapsed unconscious, spared from death but stripped of strength. Those who had come eager for slaughter were not spared. Elara saw them clearly. Men who had laughed while setting silver traps. Wolves who had dragged wounded Blood Eclipse guards toward the fire. Mercenaries with blood on their hands and pleasure in their eyes. The spirit wolf's light found them. It passed through their bodies like truth through lies. They fell without a scream, not torn apart, not butchered, simply ended. Holy light left no mess where mercy had been exhausted. Adrian scrambled backward, terror cracking his face open. "No!" he shouted. "Hold the line! She is one wolf!" The platinum wolf turned her head. Every invader still standing broke. They fled toward the gate, but the fortress itself seemed to reject them. White roots of light erupted from the stones, not trapping the innocent, but binding the guilty by their ankles, wrists, throats. Scavengers dropped their weapons and wept. Silver Moon commanders begged. The mercenary captain tried to stab a Blood Eclipse recruit on his way down. Elara's light struck him. He vanished into ash. From the western ridge, a roar split the night. Kaelen. The bond flared with black fire and gold. A moment later, the northern gates thundered open, and the Alpha King entered the courtyard in wolf form. He was magnificent and horrifying. The massive black wolf tore through the smoke, blood darkening one flank, silver wounds burning along his shoulder. But he was alive. His golden eyes blazed with murder as he took in the broken gate, the fallen invaders, the kneeling pack, and Elara standing at the heart of the battlefield like a goddess made of moonfire. For one heartbeat, even war forgot to breathe. Then Adrian made the final mistake of his life. He lunged for Kaelen. Not with courage, with desperation. A silver dagger flashed in his hand as he staggered from the snow, aiming for the wounded king's exposed side. Elara moved faster than rage. The platinum wolf crossed the courtyard in a burst of light and slammed Adrian to the ground beneath one luminous paw. The dagger spun away. Kaelen's snarl shook the walls. Adrian screamed, not from injury, from fear. Elara pressed down just enough for him to understand she could crush his ribs without effort. The heir of Silver Moon stared up at the wolf he had called worthless. Snow clung to his hair. Blood streaked his lip. His expensive armor was cracked, his noble face twisted with panic. "Please," he gasped. The courtyard listened. "I'm Adrian Vale, who had rejected her before hundreds, who had told her she was unworthy of standing beside him, who had threatened to throw her to scavengers, now clawed at the stone beneath her paw and begged. Please, Elara, mercy. I was wrong. I was angry. I was deceived." His eyes darted wildly toward Kaelen, then back to her. "You loved me once. You know you did. You would not kill me. You are too kind." There it was. His last weapon. Not strength, not rank, not love. Her own goodness, twisted into a chain. The platinum wolf stared down at him. Inside her, the girl from Silver Moon rose one final time. The girl in the threadbare dress. The girl standing beneath a full moon while Adrian's rejection tore the breath from her lungs. The girl kneeling in mud, sobbing into the storm. The girl who had believed that being chosen by him would finally make her real. Elara looked at that girl with tenderness. Then she let her rest. The platinum light receded slowly from her body as she shifted back into human form. Kaelen moved instantly, wounded and furious, pulling his cloak from a fallen guard and wrapping it around her shoulders before any gaze could reach her skin. Elara stood over Adrian, barefoot, radiant, crownless, already more royal than anyone Silver Moon had ever produced. Adrian reached for the hem of the cloak. "Elara, please, I made a mistake." She looked down at him, not with hatred. Hatred would have meant he still mattered enough to burn. Her gaze was cold, regal, and utterly empty of him. Yes, she said. You did. His lips trembled. Then forgive me. Elara tilted her head. I already left you behind. The words struck harder than a sentence of death. Adrian's face collapsed. Because he understood. She was not sparing him because she loved him. She was not killing him because she hated him. She was finished. Elara turned away. Adrian reached after her. No, don't walk away from me. She did not look back. Kaelen stood several steps away, still bleeding, still enormous, still terrifying, his eyes fixed on her with a devotion that made the battlefield fade around them. Elara walked toward him. Each step carried her farther from Silver Moon, farther from the courtyard where she had been shamed, farther from the girl who had waited for Adrian to make her worthy. Kaelen reached for her. This time, she reached back first. Their hands met in the smoke and snow. The bond surged between them, dark and bright, wolf and spirit, king and queen. Behind her, Adrian screamed as Blood Eclipse guards seized him. Elara did not turn. What will you do with him? She asked quietly. Kaelen's thumb brushed over her knuckles. His wounds were still bleeding, but his attention was entirely on her. What do you want done? Once that question would have frightened her. Now she understood what he was truly offering. Not vengeance. Choice. Elara looked toward the broken gate, the wounded warriors, the fallen invaders, the fortress that had become her home, and the pack that had bowed not to her pain, but to her strength. Let Silver Moon see him, she said. Let them see the heir who attacked under cover of darkness, hid behind mercenaries, and begged at the feet of the woman he rejected. Strip his titles. Strip his claim. Let him live with what he became. Kaelen's mouth curved faintly. That is crueler than death. No, Elara said, watching dawn begin to pale the edge of the eastern sky. It is cleaner. Kaelen studied her, then bowed his head. As my queen commands. Warmth moved through her, not because he obeyed, because he trusted her judgment. The fortress survived. By sunrise, the fires were out. The wounded had been carried to the healing wing. Silver Moon prisoners knelt in the lower yard beneath Blood Eclipse guard, their faces hollow, with the knowledge that they had invaded a kingdom and found a legend waiting at the gate. Kaelen should have gone to Mara at once. Instead, he remained standing until every threat was contained, every breach sealed, every warrior accounted for. Then he swayed. Elara caught him with both hands. The absurdity of catching a man his size would have made her laugh under any other sky. Kaelen looked offended by his own weakness. I am fine. You are bleeding through your armor. A temporary inconvenience. You have silver poison in your shoulder. Also temporary. You are going to sit down before I make you. His eyes narrowed. You would threaten a wounded king? Aye, come. I would threaten an impossible man who thinks blood loss is a personality trait. Mara, arriving with a medical pack and the expression of a woman who had been vindicated by years of frustration, said, I like her more every day. Kaelen glared at them both. Then, because Elara's hands were on his chest and her eyes held his, he sat. The Blood Eclipse warriors nearby turned away quickly, pretending not to witness their terrifying king obeying a woman in a blood-stained cloak. Elara healed him before Mara could cut away the armor. She pressed her palms over his shoulder, and platinum light flowed into the silver wound. Kaelen inhaled sharply, not from pain, but from the intimacy of it. Healing him was different now. She felt not only flesh and poison, but the whole map of him. The old scars, the buried aches, the places where he had chosen duty over comfort so often that suffering had become background noise. You are allowed to hurt, she whispered. His gaze locked on hers. So are you. The words moved between them, quiet and true. Elara drew the last of the silver from his wound. It fell into the snow in smoking droplets and vanished beneath her light. Kaelen lifted her hand and kissed her palm in front of everyone. No one gasped this time. They had learned. Their king worshipped his queen openly, and the Northlands was stronger for it. The coronation took place beneath a full moon. Not the cold, cruel moon that had watched Elara's rejection in Silver Moon, but a vast winter moon hanging over the Northlands fortress like a witness called back to correct its own silence. The courtyard had been transformed. Black banners bearing the Blood Eclipse crest lined the walls, but tonight they were threaded with platinum. Fires burned in iron towers. White flowers bloomed along the steps despite the snow, their petals glowing faintly with Elara's magic. Wolves from every northern territory filled the fortress grounds. Warriors and elders, healers and children, scouts and commanders, all gathered to see the woman their king had brought home from the dark. Elara stood before them in a gown unlike anything she had ever worn. It was not silver. Kaelen had forbidden it with such immediate disgust that Mara had laughed for a full minute. Instead, the gown was deep midnight blue, fitted at the waist and flowing like shadow around her legs, embroidered with platinum thread that caught the firelight whenever she moved. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders. Around her wrist, she still wore the old ribbon from her Omega days. Not because she needed it, because she had chosen to remember the girl who survived. Kaelen stood beside her in black ceremonial armor, his scar visible, his expression severe enough to terrify visiting dignitaries into perfect posture. But when he looked at Elara, the severity changed. Only slightly. Only enough for her to see. "You are trembling," he murmured. "There are 1,000 wolves staring at me. Would you like me to remove their eyes?" She shot him a look, his mouth barely curved. "That was a no. That was absolutely a no. I am learning restraint. You threatened mass blindness, but did not act on it." Elara laughed softly, and the bond warmed. The High Priestess of the Northlands stepped forward carrying the crown. It was not delicate. Nothing in the Northlands was. The crown had been forged from black gold and platinum, shaped into sharp, elegant points around a central moonstone that glowed with inner fire. It had belonged to no previous queen. Kaelen had ordered it made for Elara alone. The priestess lifted her voice. "Blood Eclipse kneels to no false power. We honor strength, loyalty, sacrifice, and sacred bond. Tonight, before moon, mountain, blood, and spirit, we crown Elara Vance, Platinum Wolf, healer of the fallen, protector of the Northlands, fated mate of Kaelen Cross, and queen of Blood Eclipse." The courtyard shook as every wolf knelt. Elara's breath caught. From the highest rampart to the lowest gate, the entire Northlands bowed. Not to the threadbare dress, not to the Omega title, not to the rejected girl. To her. Kaelen turned toward her. The priestess offered him the crown. For a heartbeat, Elara remembered Adrian beneath the silver arch, lifting Seraphina's hand while the pack applauded her humiliation. She remembered wanting so badly to be chosen that she had mistaken his cowardice for fate. Then she looked at Kaelen, the rival king, the monster who had asked permission before touching her, the man who had knelt in mud, kissed her bruised hand, and called her queen before she knew how to stand like one. Kaelen lifted the crown. His voice carried through the courtyard. "My pack, my kingdom, my life. Witness your queen." He placed the crown on her head. The moonstone blazed. Platinum light swept outward from Elara in a slow, warm wave. It passed through the kneeling wolves, through the fortress walls, through the snow and stone and ancient mountain roots. The Northlands answered with a howl so powerful it shook loose snow from the cliffs. Elara stood crowned beneath the full moon. Kaelen lowered himself to one knee before her. The entire kingdom followed. This time, she did not ask him to rise too quickly. This time, she let herself feel it. Not power over them, power within herself. Kaelen looked up at her, golden eyes fierce with pride. "My queen," he said. Elara reached down and touched his scarred cheek. "My king." Later, long after the ceremony fires burned low and the kingdom feasted in the halls below, Elara stood alone on the balcony outside the royal chambers, watching moonlight spill over the black pines. Kaelen found her there. He always found her. His cloak settled around her shoulders before she heard his steps. "You escaped your own coronation feast," he said. "I needed air. You needed quiet." She smiled. "That too." He stood beside her, close enough that his warmth cut through the winter cold. For a while, neither spoke. Below, the Northlands sang old war songs softened by celebration. Somewhere in the courtyard, children were laughing. The fortress no longer looked like the den of a monster. It looked like a home built by survivors. Elara touched the crown on her head. "It still feels heavy." Kaelen looked at her. "Power usually is. Did it feel that way for you?" "Always." She turned to him. He did not hide from the answer. That was one of the things she loved about him now. Kaelen could be harsh, possessive, impossible, and terrifyingly jealous of any male who breathed in her direction, but he never lied to her about the weight of what they carried. Elara looked back at the moon. "I used to think strength meant never breaking," she said. "Silver moon taught me to survive by becoming small, quiet, useful, invisible. I thought if I endured enough, someone would finally decide I was worth protecting." Kaelen's hand found hers beneath the cloak. She laced their fingers together. But that was not strength. That was captivity wearing patience as a mask. The wind moved through the pines. Elara felt the spirit wolf stir inside her, luminous and calm. "True strength is not just fighting back," she said softly. "It is learning that you were never powerless. It is choosing when to heal and when to walk away. It is finding the one person who makes you feel powerful enough to change your own destiny." Kaelen's thumb brushed her hand. "And did you find him?" Elara looked up at him. The scar, the golden eyes, the mouth that almost never smiled unless she dragged the expression out of him by force. The man who had carried her from humiliation into a kingdom, then stood beside her until she learned she did not need to be carried anymore. "Yes," she said. Kaelen's expression softened in that private, devastating way that belonged only to her. "Good. That is all you have to say?" "I am overcome." "You look exactly the same." "I assure you, my soul is very expressive." Elara laughed, and Kaelen pulled her closer, wrapping both arms around her as if the moon itself had entrusted him with its light. She leaned into him. Below them, the Northlands howled to their new queen. Above them, the full moon shone bright and clean. And for the first time in her life, Elara did not ask it to choose her. She had chosen herself. If you enjoyed this audiobook story, subscribe to the channel for more dramatic werewolf romance, fated mates, rejected Luna revenge, and powerful fantasy love stories. New stories are coming soon.